Hey everyone, I'm Chris with Dream Studios. I am back with a new video. This time we're doing a model build-up tutorial, so let's get started. This is an assembly and build-up tutorial for the ATPT, the All-Terrain Personal Transport, seen in the extended universe. If you didn't catch my history and 3D model presentation of this vehicle, click this link. I spent a few months designing it. This model can be printed on a small filament printer or a small-sized resin printer. We start this build by trimming the parts, then we do a bit of assembly, and within 20 minutes, we are ready to paint. I spend some time demonstrating how to create a base. Then we spend the rest of the time exploring many different weathering methods, achieved with dry brushing, airbrushing, masking, spattering, and using pastel powders. Let's jump right into this episode. Okay guys, here we go. One day build, the ATPT, All-Terrain Personal Transport. From my previous video, I did a whole walk around this. I did a tutorial on setting up supports for 3D printing. Since then, I've made two mods. One of the mods is here to the hips. I added a key to the hip area. So it's a half moon key. It meets in right here. You don't have to use these. In fact, the unkeyed version is also included in the STL file set, the first version. But if you wanted these to be a no-brain orientation for the hips to mount, there you go, no-brainer. And it actually sits on there tight enough where we might not need to even glue that. The other mod, and these are kind of tight, purposely tight. The other mod is on the feet. For standing feet, I introduced 7/32 holes into these feet. Right here, I've got a 7/32. That translates to 5.56 millimeters. So this is going to pin into the base. I'm making a wooden base in this tutorial also. So that'll pin that deep into the base and keep that model stable. It won't pitch forward. One thing I want to show you before I start this tutorial is the alternate foot compared to the regular flat foot, standing foot. This is the stepping foot. So you can see the difference here in the toes orientation. So these pedals are aiming down for a stepping foot. I'm not building that orientation today, but with your STL file set, that is one of the options for a walking or running pose. So let's go ahead and start this build. I've got 3 levels of paper. I've got 100 grit paper, a polishing 500 grit paper, I think this is a 60 grit sanding sponge, and then I think this is like a 200 grit sanding sponge. So I'm going to take a look at these parts. I know that underneath these thighs we'll need a little bit of smoothing out. This is where all the supports were on the underside. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on smoothing the underside of this. And honestly, just takes a few swipes of your paper just until you can see these raised areas disappear. Okay, right there, gone. Right here, gone. There, gone. I'm not going to do this for all the parts on camera. I'm just going to do this one sample. So my sanding sponge will really get in there, making sure I got all the edges. Then my 500 grit paper is a polisher, so I can come in, give it a couple passes. And there we go. Cleaned part. So you do that for these pieces. This guy, same thing over here. Actually, he stands more up, so you just have to do sanding from here to here, just that little bit. The feet, probably a little bit of scuff sanding on the bottom. It'll just take a minute for each foot. And the body down below, I will be probably switching back over to my 100 grit paper. Sanding off, looks like it's here, back here a little bit. It's under the model, you're not going to really see it, but I'm still going to go ahead and polish that up. And then back on this, boy, really not much. This is very clean parts. I think I might just scuff the back side of this guy. Let's do some base assembly now. I've got a super thin super glue in this pipette delivery system, and I've got a thick, extra thick Maxi Cure. One thing to keep in mind before you start assembling your 3D printed model is CA adhesive grabs really fast. It's not like a cast resin part where you have a little bit of play time before the part is immovable. This is almost instant. So be really cautious that you know where the part goes, you know its orientation. If you can set it down really fast, just hold it there for a second, you're good to go. If you have to maneuver something, I'm going to show you a different way to do it. But for this, I know this just goes right here, fast and easy, so I'm going to use regular CA. Just a little bit on here. I'm going to line this guy up, press it down, and he is done. That super glue bonds like in 1 second. You're done. You have no time to move around. Okay, so here, feet are the same left and right, so it doesn't matter which one of these guys you grab. There's a pin on these. There's a corresponding pinhole here. You just have to make it straight. In fact, I think I will do that, and then I'll show you the thin CA. So I'm just going to use my regular CA. Just going to kind of cover that pin. This one is not a tight fit, so I'm not too worried about getting it in position. Holding it nice and straight. And let me show you this dispenser. This is one of my favorites. This is a little pipette dispenser. This is the extra thin super glue. I'll do a little line here. So it's got a very thin consistency, and it will wick right into any hollow spots, any little canyons in here, and you can be really fast to wipe any excess. And this adhesive, like I said, will dry super duper fast, and that is permanently in position. For the thighs, you want to make sure you get the left and right correct on this. So this body sits like this. This hip, femur, whatever you want to call it, lives here. So I know that this keys to this. And if you can see, there's a key here, another key here. It only goes in one way, one orientation. So I am going to go ahead and get these guys adhered into position. Some CA into the pit. Push them in tight. Spray kick it. Just for giggles, just so it's a really strong bond, I'm going to put a little thin CA in here. Just so it wicks right into that joint. And your last piece of assembly work, same steps as before, is adhering this, making sure that this is straight to the top. You don't want it all cockeyed, you want it nice and straight. Okay, easy assembly. Our legs are fully assembled, head fully assembled. I'm saving all the antenna. I've got an antenna, 2 cannons, a grenade launcher. Those are all going in last. So guess what, guys? We are about 20 minutes into this build, and I am ready to paint. There is the engineered hole on the bottom of the feet, and this goes in pretty deep. I'm just going to insert this. I have them coming out that far. You can see how far that's embedded inside the foot. That's for added support. Okay, let's paint. My color here is a little bit of Reefer White with a little bit of SP Lettering Gray. These are Archive X paints. And kind of made it added a little bit of white on here. I've got a really nice medium kind of concrete gray color. Thinned it down a little bit with some ISO. And I am ready to paint. These parts are looking great. I decided to go with a lighter color than a standard ATST because my plan is to go super duper heavy with the weathering, and I want to start with a lighter palette as my foundation. So I'm going to go ahead and dry fit these legs on here. Make sure they're nice and tight. Again, we have these great half moon keys, so there is no making any mistakes. Okay, so now let me show you this base I have. This is just a piece of lumber from Home Depot, leftover lumber from my kitchen remodel, and I am going to drill in holes that correspond to these 2 metal pins. Okay, I've got some red acrylic paint. I'm just going to put a dab onto the ends of these steel posts. I'm going to position him where I want him, right in the middle. About like this. Okay, so I've got my 2 locations. And let's go ahead and texture this base up. To texturize this base, I'm using 3 materials. The first is Sculpt or Coat. I don't know if this is even made anymore. I've probably had this bucket for about 13 years. And as you can see, it's still extremely viable and good to go. This is like an acrylic compound, very thick paste. I'm using kitty litter. This standard old kitty litter for texture. I'm also using Miracle Grow garden soil. Okay, I'm going to start by applying a liberal amount of this sculptor coat. I'm leaving these pins in place. I can just take these guys out later. I just want to make sure I don't cover over those holes. So leave those guys alone. The thicker you put this on, the longer it takes to dry. If it's on really thin, you'll have it dry in a couple hours. Super thick, you might want to wait till the morning, depending on how warm it is. Okay, so I'm just going to get this on here with my hands. The more organic, the better. I use this technique to make the what we used to call the Durabase. You can see it in a couple of Adam Savage's tested videos. I made those years and years and years ago. Same technique. Now for texture, just going to sprinkle on some of this kitty litter. Yep, kitty litter. So I'm going to go pretty liberal with it. For additional texture, I'm going to grab some of this garden soil and more of the sculptor coat. And you can get like a really interesting texture just by flattening all this in. I really like the litter. If you wanted to, you could grab some rocks out from the garden and stick them on here. If you have any sand, like I don't have any sand handy, but if I did, I'd sprinkle some of the sand on here. And this looks dumb at first, but it'll all make sense when it's dried and painted. Get a little bit more soil on here. Alright, I am going to let this sit out in the sun. This is a printout of the PDF that comes with this kit. The digital files have this in PDF format. If you get a physical kit from me, you'll get this printout. It's printed on regular copy paper. If you mess up this step, just print another one, go again. So we're going to trim these guys out. These are detail decorations for the ankles. The other part of this template sheet is these two guys. These are windows. Small window pane, larger window pane. You can cut these out of styrene. You can cut them out of clear. You can cut them out of acetate if you wanted to. So my process, and I did this already, is I cut these guys out and I trace them onto, I think I used a thick acetate. Actually, no, I used a thin PETG. Very, very thin plastic. I mean, you can probably score this off of a Tupperware container if you wanted to, or soda bottle. So anyways, you trim, tape this down, you trim out your piece, and since I used clear, what I'll be doing with these is taking the backing off. This one has 2 sheets of backing. I've got the tape and then a sheet of clear. And I'll be spray painting this black on one side, let it dry. When I peel this other side off, I'll have a nice shiny sheen. Okay, so I'm going to do that for both of the windows I've cut out already. So for these two guys, we have them fully trimmed. I'm going to spray these with a little bit of Spray 77. This is the Super 77. Not too heavy, just a nice little coat. I'll let that cure up for about a minute, and then they go onto the ankles. I'm going to try to do this on camera, make my best attempt. I like to use a blade, just a thin X-Acto blade, so I can place this just right. Oh boy, this is going to be a challenge on camera. I'm going to line him up. I mixed up a very dark gray color, not black all the way, and I am going to paint these inside bits, all these little rubbery spots, the spots that you would imagine bend when this guy is walking. And these are all going to be this dark gray, just to give the impression that it's rubber and flexible. Not too shabby so far. That is a really cool look. So I painted the shoulder connectors, hip connectors. I've got all the little rubber pieces painted out, looking like Ed 209 back here. Before I really start digging into the weathering, I decided to mask off a few panels. I'm going to go just a little bit darker gray. So I'm going to get this guy darker gray on that side, and on this side, this guy, that guy. Same darker gray. Just to break up the color a little bit. You don't have to do yours this way. I'm just decided I want to get a little variation here. Break up. Here is my color palette for weathering. I've got a smoky black, dark gray, medium gray, brown, a green weathering, and then a light gray. Actually, this is the original. So I'm going to use this at the end for overspray. That's my original gray color. So here we go with streaking and staining. I am starting this off with a smoky black color. I'll be switching over to brown after I get a little bit of tone going here. Starting down here at the feet. Feet are going to be the most beat up area of this guy. And I'm starting light. Let's see where this takes us. At the joints, we're going to be nice and oily. A lot of movement here, so stained up pretty good. Just really shadowy here at the bottom. A lot of movement here at that hip joint. So, dark. Weathered down. Lot of dirt and grime down here under the chassis. Maybe a couple of scorch marks here. This cannon's going to see a lot of action, so I'm going to scorch him really good right now. Figured this is like a ventilation fan here. I'll be going in there with a lot of brown, but I'm going to tone it with a little bit of this black at first. Okay, this is a warmer color, brown. It's going to look a lot lighter when it comes on misty. So if you can see this, I'm going to really get down under these petals. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. Where are you? I'm coming up from below. Same thing with the body. I'm going to come in here, start introducing this color. Might give the small indication of streaks. A little heavier down below here. I'm going to shadow this brown right here. Boy, this side looks so naked compared to where I've got some of that streaking starting. So I assembled this. Guys, here I was thinking that this thing could not stand on its own because it just looks so front heavy, but this guy stands on its own on these flat feet. So never mind what I was talking about earlier. I'm still glad I pinned it though. But look at that. This guy is stable on his feet. I'm surprised. I talked myself into that it wouldn't be able to balance, but hey, we got it. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to introduce some chipping into this, some black chipping. I have a sponge, and I'm using flat black. And I'm going to get some of this paint off that sponge, and I'm going to go ahead and randomly get some small scale scratches going on. I brought you down closer to the bench, but I think I'll get a little bit closer. So I figure there's a bunch of rocks flying up this way. There's a lot of damage happening here. So little chips. Black is the color I'm going for. I think I'll bring a little bit up under the decal. And back here I'll do like a big blotch right here so you can see it. Okay, that is some very fine chips. I'm going to hit these edges. I'm also going to come in here with a little micro brush, like a little micro pad, and get a few more aggressive chips happening. If you can see that. So these are joining the party of those small little chips. Put some up here on this toe. Maybe a couple up here, up this toe. Back here. Just a few black spots here and there, some big scratching under here. I'm going to introduce a few streaks here, very similar to what the falcon exhibits. So I'm going to do that using a few pieces of tape. So I'm going to make this one a nice long streak. It'll live right there. And he will start at that panel. Oops. Start with these two and see what they look like and see if we want to do more. And I'm going to go real subtle. Heavier at the top, lighter down below. I'm going to stop right there. Heavy top, feather it down. Maybe nice little weather streak right there. Real subtle. There. I like that. I think I'll do a bigger one that comes all the way from the top all the way down. Feather down. See what he looks like. Very good. And I think I'm going to soften him up just a little. Just a tiny bit of airbrush over the top of that guy, straight down. Do that for him too. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this panel back here. I've seen this technique used by ILM on a few of the X-Wings, and they'll mask off one of the panels and spray blast black around the area, and what that does is it leaves a kind of a fresher looking panel where everything else around it is all scorched, as if that panel was completely devastated and they replaced it with a newer piece from a different fighter. So that's what we're doing here. I'm going to mask off this rectangle the best I can, and I'm going to scorch all the way around it. Okay, so I oversprayed that just a tiny bit. I'm really liking that effect. Let's go ahead with some rust colors. What I was doing here is giving this a little bit of a halo, this blast mark that I committed to. And then I kind of brought my airbrush out, made a little star pattern. I might go back in there and adjust that a little bit later. But I also did a little bit of haloing here on some of these dark spots. I'll do this guy here. It's just a good look. Here's a dark spot right here I missed. I'll do that right now. Okay, here's a little blast mark. I'll turn that into a blast. And then I'll streak it out a little. Directional blast. I'm going to start introducing some earth colors, some rust colors, and brown colors, mostly. I'm using this to start. These are Tamiya weathering powders. I'm busting out all the tricks for this video. So I've got a rust color here I'm using, and these come with this little applicator side, and there's a brush side. And then I also have an earth tone color, sand, light sand, and mud. So I'm using a little bit of that, and these are really easy to use. Okay, that quick and easy. Couple rust streaks. So I'll go around the model and do that here and there. I think I might put a few down coming from these guys. Alright, let me spend a few minutes introducing some of that. This blast mark here, I want it to be a little more starred out, a little more spread out. So I'm just going to grab this, give it a couple strokes outward, and just like that, I've got more of a star hit. Just an idea for you guys. This is what this base looks like after curing overnight. I used a little bit of Bondo here to cover up one of the spots that didn't get covered very much. Then I sprinkled on some kitty litter. So now I'm going to do brown. I'm going to do tan on this surface and black for the edges. We're on to our last few colors. I've got a light rust color. I'm going to follow this up with a dark rust color. So this chassis will be pretty dirtied up like this. I might bring that rust color up just a little bit on the corner. Maybe a tiny bit here at the chin. And then on the legs, at the joints. Machinery will rust at the joints. My last step is introducing just a bit of spatter. I'm doing this with a little bit of acrylic paint on a brush. I don't know if that's too far away for you to see, but it leaves a little bit of a spatter pattern. And I'm going to do that down here on the feet. Heavy on the feet. It's just mud kicking up and dirt kicking up. And a little bit lighter as it goes up the legs. And then I'll do the undercarriage just a little bit. So you'll see this in still photos when I show these at the end, but yeah, it's giving it a little bit of that spatter. Okay, last thing is taking the tape and the backing paper off of the windscreens, 2 of them, and installing them. I don't have to worry about super glue crazing the surface, but I think I'll still use a little bit of Elmer's glue or maybe silicone adhesive to lock these windows into position, and I think we're done. Look how much more finished that is with those windows in place. There is one more step. I totally spaced doing this. I was about ready to take photos of this, but then I realized, oh my god, cables. So in my renders, in my design, I've got cables coming out of here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cables on the legs. There's a couple cables that are coming out going back here. So I drilled a few little holes going out of here, coming into here, and I'm just using regular old wire and cutting that and using a little bit of CA to adhere a few little detail cables. And there we have it. leg cables, undercarriage cables. One last thing I did on this kit is I added a couple figures, this pilot guy and this clone trooper guy. These are just available on Thingiverse, so if you wanted to include these in your kit, they are freely available on Thingiverse. Just scale them to the right size, and we are done. What a cool kit. We used a whole bunch of techniques on this. Airbrushing, filtering, pigment powders, masking, spattering, panel colors. This is a really, really cool example of just many different weathering techniques. I went pretty far with the weathering. You don't have to go as far with yours. But, yeah, here we go. Hey, we also used kitty litter. Second time. Kitty litter for the base. And I am going to call this a wrap. I hope I was able to guide you through this build, show you how simple it is, show you a few tricks. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoy this content, be sure to hit subscribe, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.